Okay, everybody, you are in for a treat because we have a beast of a woman on here. Her name is Aisha Fitzgerald. She is a Beachbody coach. She's one of the top Beachbody coaches. I first got to hear her speak at a leadership event that I went to, and I absolutely loved her fire and her drive and her confidence on stage telling everybody about building a business. She has been with Beachbody for 6 years. She's built a 7-figure business with them and then decided to pivot and build her own thing. So she's got her company called She Goes. It's all about teaching people personal development and how to start a podcast. Hello, everyone needs to know that. She also has an awesome podcast called Empower Her, right? That is the name.
Yep.
Empower Her. And it has over 1 million downloads. So like I said, this girl is on fire and I'm so excited to have her on the show today. So welcome.
I'm so excited to be here, Joy. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to talk about all the things. I'm here for it, girl. Thank you.
Well, where would you like to start? How about you give us a little bit of a background to how you got started with all these things? Because I'm sure you weren't born this way.
No. It's really interesting because when I think about how I started, I was the little girl who had, sold Huckleberry jam on the street corner and bracelets in elementary school. And I always knew in my gut that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't really know what that actually looked like. And obviously we often become a direct, reflection of the expectations of our peer group and who we surround ourselves with. So I went through high school to college. After college, graduated. All of my girlfriends and I did the same thing. We went into our career paths and the plan was climb the corporate ladder, wait until Friday, celebrate on the weekends and kind of just rinse and repeat. And my first job was in corporate recruiting, actually. And then I moved into IT project management. And I'm not someone who actually hated my job ever. I had great career trajectory. I've actually, every single one of my managers I've had in the corporate world, I've loved, which is very unique. And I had a lot of opportunity, but I still had this gut feeling that I wanted more. And when I say more, I don't mean that being an entrepreneur means that you're more than not being an entrepreneur. But for me, it meant I wanted something that was more in line with how I was going to show up in my life and how I could feel fulfilled and just be myself and be excited about life. And working with predominantly men that were 20 years older than me in a corporate structure where they were software engineers and I'm really bubbly, I felt like I was kind of squishing myself into a box often. And because I didn't know what to do, I didn't want to stay stuck anymore. And I knew I needed more confidence in order to actually make a change and figure out what the hell I wanted to do with my life. So back then I was 24 years old and I decided to start a fitness program to work on my health and fitness goals, thinking that would lead to more confidence and energy to then go find my thing. Well, sometimes things come in very unexpected packages. And I ended up kind of reluctantly at first until I really just caught the vision of what it could be. I joined, network marketing company, Beachbody, like you mentioned, and decided to build it on the side. My intention was never to build a 7-figure plus business. It actually was never to leave the corporate world. It was really just to fill this gut feeling, this void that I had, that I could make impact and get the fulfillment from that. And it would be a fun side thing for me. I still didn't think it was the big thing. I didn't think that it was going to fulfill my entrepreneurial dreams. I thought at the time I was, 24, unmarried, no kids or anything. And a lot of the people that I looked at within the Beachbody network had these crazy, amazing, back against the wall stories. And they were often stay-at-home moms and just I didn't connect with any of that. So I thought, well, this will be a fun side thing for me. And then I'll figure out what my next thing is. Well, I ended up loving it. And what's so interesting, and I really want the listeners to hear this, sometimes if you've got a gut feeling that you want something to be done a different way or you're not seeing it represented, then maybe it's because you're supposed to be the representation. And that gut feeling that you have that we want to shove down and wish away can often be the biggest catalyst for change and put you on the right path. And for me, I started going to these Beachbody events and started to catch on to a bigger vision. And I was like, there's nobody that, has a 6-figure salary that actually has a pretty good on paper, checks all the boxes, but has a gut feeling she wants more. Where's that story? And I decided it should be that story because nobody has that story that was speaking on these stages. And My now fiance and I moved from Seattle, where we were living at the time, to New York City for him to go to dental school. I got my, dream corporate job at Google in corporate recruiting and built my business before and after work. And about a year and a half later, it was actually an opportunity cost situation for me that I left the corporate world. So I have a lot of people that I'm connected with, whether that's through my podcast or social media or whatever, that are like, Keish, like, I love that you just jumped and like the net would appear and like you knew it. I'm like, no, I didn't do that at all. I calculated out because at the time I had my now fiance in dental school full time, and I had to make sure that I could support both of us living in downtown New York City with this side business that, started to earn more income. And so in April of 2015, left the corporate world completely to build my business full-time, partnering with Beachbody. Since then, moved to San Diego, started a podcast a year and a half ago, which kind of put me down this personal development path to get a little bit more clarity by just taking action and doing the next best step for me. And then in January of 2020, launched my new company, personal development community, and podcasting course. So here we are. It's been a lot of twists and turns, lots of ups and downs. That's the very overarching concept of how I got here.
I love that network marketing was going to be your leap into confidence to figure out what you really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like because of network marketing. It was because you thought getting in shape would like make you more confident.
And I thought doing something that other people wouldn't think that I would do, that felt like I couldn't do it, would also help me. Because when I started that very first business in January of 2014, I was 24 years old and I was really worried about what other people thought about my path. So I decided that part of my success criteria was that I was going to learn how to be more Kacia. As weird as that sounds, talking about myself in third person, but like I decided, how can I learn how to be more me and do the thing that feels right to me rather than worrying about what like some random girl from third grade thinks about what I'm doing.
Oh my gosh, we should touch on that because so many women struggle with what other people think and not having the confidence. So number one, did it work? Did it give you the confidence? And number two, what even gave you the confidence in the first place to be like, well, I want to be more me instead of what other people think?
Yeah. So what works really well for me when I'm making any decision that I did back then but couldn't articulate this way was I play it out to the worst case scenario and the best case scenario and decide that me doing it is also not about me alone. So worst case scenario, play it all out. I look stupid, not going to die. Like I won't die from doing something that I'm scared to do. Like maybe jumping out of a plane. Okay. Yeah. But not like starting a business on social media. And when I played it out to the best case scenario, I really started to paint that picture of like, how good could this be? How happy could I be? Who could benefit as a byproduct of me going for it? Who could see my example of how I'm showing up in the world as a testimony of what's possible for them? How could this impact the foundation of my future marriage? How could this help me craft the woman that I could become for when I have kids? That when they look at me and I say that they can do anything that they want in this world, they look back and they say, Mom, I know I watched you. Like that to me was like, at even 24, without even having that really on my radar, that was just such a gut thing that it was like taking radical responsibility, that the alternative was regret. And I fear regret so much more than I fear failure or looking stupid or stumbling or face planting. And as I started to make that one decision, like post that one time on social media, which is what it was for me, where I felt like I was literally going to poop my pants. I was so scared. I was so worried. But then once you do it, it gets easier. And the only way to get better and to build confidence is by doing that thing that you said that you're going to do over and over again, like you're putting deposits in your confidence bucket. So it's definitely not that now, 6 years later at 30, that I don't care what other people think. And when people say, screw what everyone else thinks, I'm like, that's literally not how we're designed fundamentally as humans. We're designed to belong. We're wired for certainty and belonging. So it's not that I don't care what other people think. I just care what I think most. And in terms of how I'm going to show up, I don't want to get to the end of my life and think that I lived someone else's life plan. And then not only did I not live the life that I thought I should live, but I resent that person because I followed their rule book. And I don't want to do that to them either.
Oh, 100%. I had a moment just like this when I joined Beachbody, and it was totally looking at the end of my life and what I would regret. And I knew I would regret not trying. I knew I would look back and say, what if? So let's go into that. You mentioned opportunity cost when you decided to quit Google and go full time. How do you calculate opportunity cost? I think this is something that people don't do enough of.
No, that is the number one driver for how I take action when I need to tap into the logics. I'm a very emotional thinker, and I'm doing life with someone. My fiance is a very he's so logical, and he makes things based off of data, and I make everything off of just emotions. And I found that middle balance is so nice to stick in that middle balance, because you feel like you've got data to support the decision that you're making, but you also feel like it's right. And for me, what that means is I have to really start to think about what are the actually charting it out. What are the best things that could come from this, and play it all out to that, and what are the worst things that could come from this. And it's always more good things when it's in your heart and it's in your gut as something that you feel called to do. I don't believe, as a core fundamental principle of life, I do not believe that you're gifted a vision unless you're also gifted the ability to figure out how to get there, the resourcefulness to figure it out. Because I'm gifted a vision that some of my closest girlfriends are not gifted that vision at all. So they might look at me like I'm crazy, and I look at them like I don't want that life either, but we're gifted unique visions and different skill sets. So because I believe that, and then I actually put it to paper, what are the positives that could come from this, and challenge myself to come up with as many as I can, and then challenge myself to come up with the negatives. What I've found is the negatives, the costs essentially, are things that often we worry about but don't actually happen. But the positives, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much potential good that I can't risk not knowing all of the good that could potentially come. So for someone that is logical brained or trying to be more logical brained, actually seeing it is really helpful for me, of going to impact and income and fulfillment and joy and happiness and contribution. As humans, we love contribution and progress. And there's no reason not to do something that you feel called to do when you actually see on paper all of the positives that can come from it and who could benefit as a byproduct of your bravery. That often will help us getting into action. And once we start, then it gets easier to keep going, right? That momentum starts. So that's always worked really well for me.
So you're talking opportunity cost in potential scenarios, but did you run hard numbers? I'm assuming you totally did when you quit Google.
Did I run? No. So what I did basically was prepared myself from a financial perspective that if I had zero income for 6 months, if it all went away, that I would be okay. So opportunity cost for me was just proactively saving and having the actual finances. But the opportunity cost was scenarios, 100%. All of the scenarios, how good could it be, and how much impact could it make, and how fulfilled could I be, and what kind of life could this set us up for, and what could potential conversations look like. It was 100% scenario based.
Totally. So tell us about one of the most challenging times in building a business, as I'm sure you've had multiple moments being should I quit?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Especially first of all, number one is the beginning, because you have absolutely no proof that it's going to work out. Right. Versus it's so much easier to say, sitting here, with Beachbody, I've earned somewhere around $1.4 million, somewhere around there. So of course I can say, yeah, it was worth it month one that I started, because I can say that from the place that I'm in now. But at first you have no proof that it's going to work out. You have a lot of people that don't understand your vision. You don't have a lot of testimonials or people that have said that, their life has been impacted by you. You are dealing with yourself being your own worst critic, and you have the least amount of confidence that you've probably ever had. And it's brand new, which going into any job, let alone in the entrepreneur space, but any job, you sit down at your first day of your job, you feel like you have no idea what to do. And you're like, who do I even ask? Does anyone know? You feel so confused. So the beginning part was the hardest. And the way that I combated that was I started to think, how can I just win today? How can I win today and then wipe the slate clean and then win the next day? And that winning criteria were things that I could actually control. So for anyone that is in the entrepreneurial space or in network marketing, the goal can't be something that you actually can't control. Someone signing up for your product or your program or whatever it is, you can control how many people you tell about it, or if you craft an email about it to your list, or if you add value to your target demographic, but you can't control how many people are actually going to sign up. So I made my winning the day criteria things that I could control, because I like to think of confidence like a bucket. And I kind of mentioned that earlier, but it's like a bucket that you build where every single day you're putting deposits into that bucket. So when things go wrong, or when you doubt yourself, or when you stumble, or when you totally fail, some comes out of your confidence bucket, but you can still keep going because you're building it day by day. Versus a lot of times people are waiting to feel successful until they've reached a certain milestone. In network marketing, it's often income-based or rank-based. In the entrepreneur space, it's often launch-based. In the corporate world, it's often title-based, right? In the relationships, it's, do you have a ring on your finger? Are you a whatever? Like all of these different milestones that we wait to define success as then. But what I did early on, and I didn't really realize I was doing this, although looking back, I'm like, that's why I was able to keep going, was I just defined success by my own terms so I could start to get that momentum, and that helped me build confidence. And as I started to build more confidence, it got easier. Not because of anything other than I just believed that I could figure it out. So I could trust myself. So number one was the beginning. Number two was a massive leadership lesson, which I think anyone in any type of leadership role, our team was pushing for the highest rank in the company. And in the network marketing structure, that's essentially a lot of people maintaining their roles. And I had a coach, like someone that I was mentoring on my team, that quit, which impacted that rank, the highest rank in the company, during the time that we had to stay in this qualification period. And that's not going to make a lot of sense to people that aren't in network marketing, but for those that are, it's a big deal in that structure.
Yeah.
And what I realized is I was expecting, even at that tenure in my leadership, I was expecting that other people were going to be led and excited about the things that I was excited about. And almost all of the women that I was mentoring were, to a certain degree, but one of them wasn't. And while it sucked at the time to lose out on what was one of the biggest bonuses, it was actually the biggest bonus that Beachbody's ever had in the history of the company that quarter. But on top of that, yes, that was tough, but it was also this really eye-opening opportunity that I was like, if you want to be a strong leader, number one, you're going to have to realize that not everybody works like you. You need to learn how to lead people that are motivated by different things than you, which kind of led me more into the personal development space, which now is what I'm in now, which is interesting. But on top of that, I realized the most important thing, that successful people that are crushing their goals don't have anything that I didn't have. They just learn from their failures so quickly and get back up, and know that every time they get back up, they're building resilience. And that's actually the most important muscle of all. So at the time, it sucked. I ugly cried, the kind where like your mascara and your snot gets in your mouth and you're wearing blue blockers and you're like squeegeeing off your blue blockers, and it sucks. And I doubted myself and I wanted to quit, and I was like, screw this, I'm out. But I got back up, and it made me so much more confident that no matter what came, I got it, you know? So you need those too, those character building like fails, I guess.
You know, I've noticed there's a theme across the board with people that are really successful. They have a really hard moment. Well, they have multiple, but then they finally have this like final really hard moment where they finally learn to point the finger back at themselves.
Yes. Yep.
And they decide to change.
Yep.
And that's like their pivotal moment, is I think, for me personally, like I had so many moments of wanting to blame my team or wanting to point the finger, wanting to blame all these things. And finally, what changed for me was when I decided to point the finger at myself and only and say, I'm the problem and the solution in my business.
Yes. And so, that's so powerful. Like what you just said, I would put like 800 explanation points on, because that is everything. Like just asking, what can I own in this? In a conversation, like, I mean, I do this in my relationships, like with my girlfriends, with my family, where it's like, hold on, what can I own here? Because the finger that I want to point at them, I can't point it right back at myself. And that gives you this freedom. Like, I mean, you know, but anyone that hasn't fully experienced that, it actually gives you this freedom and joy that you can actually get more obsessed with the process than what the process produces, because you decide that you can control a lot more than you realized, as in your perception, your behavior, your thoughts, and then in turn your actions. And then there's so much that you can't control, but you're willing to take ownership for what you can. And that is the secret sauce. You nailed it.
I tell everybody, I'm like, it's the hardest thing, but it actually is the most freeing thing. Like taking 100% responsibility for everything in your life. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what separates the successful from the not, 100%.
Yep.
So I would love to hear about one of your biggest failures, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. So one that I think could be relevant to the entrepreneurial space is, I had someone that I was working with that I absolutely loved. And I think I just assumed that they would have the same vision as me, that they would show up the same way that I would. And I had to make a tough decision to separate. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, where I had to separate from working with this person. And I had been like so close with them from a friendship perspective that it was hard to separate out the actual like relationship with the business relationship. So I've learned that when I ever employ someone or have someone that's working for me in a business capacity, that there has to be very clear-cut rules, because just because we are friends and maybe understand each other in that capacity doesn't mean that they'll understand exactly the vision. So I learned how to get more clear, but along the way, friendships were impacted from me not learning that in real time. So I guess the tangible thing from that is when you are hiring someone or when you are working with someone on your team, making sure that you take responsibility for very clear expectations of what a job role is and what you actually expect, and not giving too much flexibility, because that could end up impacting the relationship as a whole. And I learned that the really hard way. So that's my advice, is have a job description, hire someone for that role, have very clear expectations, and take ownership for your part as their boss if you're in a hiring role. But that's been one of my biggest learning lessons in my career.
And everything is a learning lesson. It's not really a failure.
Yeah.
You look at it that way.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. How would I know? And that's the thing too, is like, this is why people get so caught up in failure, but I'm like, it's required for you to get better. I literally don't know how you learn when everything's going right. Like, I don't learn anything when it's like crushing it, like, yeah, and you don't feel proud of yourself when it's super easy. Like, I'm proud of myself that I had to navigate this really weird situation as a CEO for the first time, and that it was hard and messy and I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but then I figured it out. And now I'm like, okay, I learned so much and that won't happen again. Great, now I know. But how would I have known?
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so talk to me about when you decided to pivot. Here you build this huge Beachbody business, and then it sounds like you have another moment of realizing this isn't the thing.
Yeah. I actually had it a couple years into, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, which means I have like 800 million ideas at all given points of the time. I have so many invention ideas, like living with me. Like sometimes I just look at my fiance and I'm like, I'm just like crazy because I have so many ideas. But I knew a few years in, when I started to get the hang of it, that it wasn't new anymore. And if you're familiar with Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 7, the enthusiast, which also means I really like to start. I have no problem starting things because I get really excited. And that's great. But when you don't know what the next thing is, you can feel really stuck. But the skill set that I have is I can reframe everything in a positive way very well. So it's almost like I spent part of the time that I was actively building my Beachbody business trying to reframe why it made sense to build this and why I should shove down that feeling of wanting something else in addition, because it made sense. I was earning income. I loved what I was doing. I loved the opportunities that I had with the company. Like, there was nothing wrong with it. I couldn't say one negative thing about it, except for that my gut was telling me there was something else. But I did what I would not recommend anyone does, and I shoved that feeling down, which I know is not right to do, but I did it anyways because it just didn't make sense that I couldn't be happy with the trajectory that I had, which was crazy incline. But after shoving it down for a little while, I decided, let me just start something else in addition, kind of like how I started Beachbody back in the day, where it was like, let me just work on my health and fitness goals because that will help me build more confidence to figure out what my next thing is. Well, I started a podcast, and that next step then led me to having a lot of people listen to that podcast who wanted more access to me and wanted a community. And then I built that and I started this company, and now we've got all sorts of things, a community that's building around a company where I can create products based off of what they want. But it's that first step. And a lot of times we think we don't know how to get out of that feeling of discomfort, but really it's just, what can you do in the next 24 hours? Maybe you don't know your career path, but can you go on LinkedIn and find 5 jobs you might be interested in the next 24 hours? Yes. You can't run the marathon, but can you sign up for the marathon? Yes. Like, you can't build the 6-figure business or have the 1,000,000 download podcast, but can you start it? Yes. So I think taking that next first step and choosing not to stay stuck or label this uncomfortable feeling as a bad thing is what helped me move through that. And yeah, I mean, I listened to my gut, and the last year that I wasn't listening to it, it just got progressively worse and worse and worse. So it was at first a rumble, and then it just started to be like randomly crying and being like, what is wrong with me? And then I made a change and now I feel fine.
Oh my gosh. I would love for you to speak more on that for just a second, because I
Yeah.
do the same thing. And I think so many people don't realize that's their gut. They think something's wrong with them, right? Like, or they think it's just this or it's just that or whatever.
Yeah. And I think it's because we're so comfortable with certainty as humans, right? That the unknown of what could be makes us so freaked out that we would rather stay uncomfortable and know than get out of that uncomfort and not know. And so for me, I think the best way to start was to get very intentional about listening to my own gut and doing things for the first time often. So it doesn't even have to be something massive. It doesn't have to be change career paths, launch a business, launch a podcast, run a marathon. It literally could be go to a restaurant and eat food that you would never normally eat. Go to a concert that's outside of your comfort zone. Go to a workout class that like you feel like you are like the least qualified person to be in that workout class. Like make something new for dinner. Have a tough conversation. Like start to look even at your calendar and take inventory of if you're doing anything for the first time, because that helps you get more comfortable with taking those calculated risks and trusting your own intuition. So because I've been in the habit of doing that for so long, I can identify now when it is a gut feeling of needing to make a change. And then I can lean into it knowing that eventually more clarity will come, but I have to expose myself to different ideas, different podcasts, listen to people who didn't grow up like me or don't have the same perspective as me, have conversations with people and start to pick other people's brains about what they're doing and know that that will come. But if I do the same thing over and over again, rinse and repeat, I should expect to continue to stay stuck and not trust my own gut. So the habit of that combined with identifying that it on the other side of that discomfort is so much more fulfillment than staying comfortable can give you. And if you can lean into that and have that experience that once you go through it just one time, you're going to be so happy and you're going to be willing to do it again.
Do you meditate?
I don't actually.
Okay. Cause I was like, that's when I totally listen to my gut, is like when I meditate for sure.
Okay, here's the thing. I'm such a hyper person that when people say meditate, I know that this isn't true, but I picture sitting super still for a really long time. So I kind of meditate, but it's like moving meditating. Like I go on so many walks and I verbally process a lot. And then I also go on walks and I don't even listen to music. I just put my headphones in so no one could talk to me. And and that's my own version of meditating where I can like sit and actually think with my thoughts, but I don't sit down crisscross applesauce like on a pillow or anything.
Yeah. But I love your advice of starting to listen to your gut is trying new things. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have this rumbling and it leads to being emotional and like crying and being like, what's wrong with me? What made you go, oh, podcast, that's what I should start with?
Yeah. Because I felt like going back to that core principle that if you have a gut feeling that you're supposed to be doing something, it's in you for a reason. So I kind of just decided maybe other people could benefit from me sharing about the journey of this because I'm bold enough to share about it. And I was gifted that, right? I was gifted that desire to want to get bold enough to put myself out there and be courageous enough. Because the courage part actually hasn't been the problem for me. It was more so just the clarity part, right? Of like, what actually is it? So to be a podcaster, I didn't have to have clarity of exactly what I was going to do. I just had to be willing to put myself out there and learn as I go and share what I was learning. So it made sense logically to start that because I had also learned and gotten so much belief borrowed from other people through the podcasting platform. And I love talking and I love connecting with people. So I was like, gosh, I mean, it just makes sense that I could do this. And then I'll just be really honest about everything that I'm learning. And having a podcast that releases 2 episodes a week in the personal development space means I have to be so on top of my own game to learn and grow. So I knew it would force me to be in this growth journey that I needed to get more clarity. And then the business came about just shy of a year after the podcast. On my 30th birthday we were sitting in a bar drinking spicy margaritas and I came up with a business idea. And then we mapped it out on Notepad.
I love that. So how did you launch a podcast and get it to be so successful right away? Was it
Yes.
for like your Beachbody community listening when you first started it, or how did you get so into like the other spaces too?
Yeah. So I wanted it not to be for my Beachbody community, actually. I wanted this to be an extension of my own brand. So I actually rarely mentioned Beachbody or talked about network marketing in general, especially when I first started. I wanted to be a personal development podcast. And I think there were I identified a need kind of even back again. A lot of these patterns have repeated themselves in my life where I didn't see it represented the way that I wanted it to be. So I decided to be the representation where I didn't see personal development podcasts where the host of the podcast felt like we were girlfriends chatting. Every personal development podcast that I had listened to at that point that had a female host, they felt like they were really far ahead of me and they weren't talking like we were peers. So I wanted to create what I wished existed. And so I think part of that was why it resonated really early on with people. And I got really intentional about the woman that it was for and the pain points that she was going through. And I decided to be ruthlessly consistent with actually building it. I decided to answer every single DM of someone that tagged it. I decided to really just develop a community around it early on and remember every single time before I plugged my mic in who it was for. And it wasn't actually for me. It was for the woman that was like my best friend that I wanted to talk to. And I would visualize us before I would even plug in my mic. And that helped a ton with building that connective tissue early on. And then I didn't niche down to it being business. And there's been times where I've had like business people on the podcast, but I was like, I'm going to reel it back into personal development and really tried to stay in my own lane. And it's been really fun. And I love it.
It is so fun.
So fun. You know, it's like you plug it in, you get to talk and like people can listen to you like naked in the shower. It's crazy.
And then obviously you're really good at collaborating because that's a huge part of growing a podcast. How did you get so into like other spaces? I know in network marketing particularly, it's so easy to get like stuck in just that world.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just I asked the community often who they would want to hear on the podcast, and I listened to that. But then also whatever books that I was like, I specifically just reach out to people that I thought could add value based off of their topics. I very rarely, like when I was pitched for people to be on my podcast, I very rarely got guests that way. It was more me just figuring out who I wanted that they could deliver on a specific topic area. And then I would slide into their DMs with a video and I would ask them to be on my podcast where I'd be like, hi, I'm Kacia. This is weird. And I still do this to this day. This is how I get all of my guests on my podcast is I video DM them on Instagram and explain to them why I think they should be on my show. And it works to about half of them. Some of them, I DM Ellen DeGeneres all the time. She never gets back to me, but like eventually she will. But some people that caught me off guard that said yes right out the gates because they were so caught off guard by it. Like my second interview was Dave Hollis. So
I know, I saw that and I was like, what?
And I was very confused why he said yes straight out the gates, but I was like, you would be the first guy on my podcast, which was true, but he was also episode number 2. So I think there's so much in just not trying to be so perfect, like in a carefully curated, everybody wants to look perfect. Like their shit is all together all the time. Like that's so boring. It's so unrelatable. And I just was like, I don't want to have the perfect email template. It's just, that's not me. So I don't have an email template. So I just video DM people. And then the people that want email templates, I've created them for them in our course and stuff, but I don't use that.
Okay. So talk to me about personal development and what you love to teach people about, because clearly that's like your jam and what you love. Yeah. So why are you so passionate about it? And what in the personal development world are you most passionate about right now?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I like teaching is essentially just the amount of effort that you put into controlling your thoughts is literally the secret sauce for your entire life and how happy and fulfilled you're going to be. Because no matter what is going on externally in the world, 40% of our happiness from a scientific standpoint comes from our perception and our behaviors, which stems from our thoughts. So if you can control your thoughts and if you can take responsibility not for your first thought, but for your second thought, as frequently as possible, you can literally craft your life into something that you're obsessed with. For example, very, very simple example. Wake up in the morning, you go into the bathroom to brush your teeth, and you think about how tired you are because little Tommy is teething. I don't know anything about kids, but like Tommy's teething and like you just did not sleep and you're thinking, I'm so tired. What is your brain going to do? It's going to go scan, look for evidence to prove that you're tired, and then you're going to set yourself up to feel tired versus your first thought could be I'm tired. But now you're intentionally taking control of the next thought, which is your second thought. And this is not rocket science, but it is not common practice. It's very common sense, but people don't do this where it's like it changes everything. Second thought, mine is always what am I excited about for today? And then I'm scanning the entire day to figure out what I'm excited about. And I'm literally priming my brain to get excited. And I think there's so many times that we go through life and we aren't even consciously aware that we're thinking like 60,000 thoughts a day and we're not even taking control of those thoughts. And we're doing 55% of things daily based off of habit loops that we've created over time that are put into a different section of our brain that we're not even realizing. And we're going through on autopilot. So why I'm passionate about it is because if you can understand the responsibility that you have as a person to take control of your thoughts, then you can actually make change in your life. And you can view the world through a completely different lens. And so much of us are taught that our happiness and fulfillment comes from our environment, the external world, which really only contributes to 10% of your happiness. And it's like the things, and if the world wasn't this way, if this wasn't going on and this wasn't going on, it's like, no, events are neutral. You create the meaning. So like, what meaning are you creating? And is the story that you're telling yourself even true? Or is it through the lens of someone who's not taking responsibility that they can actually show up in a better way? So I'm obsessed with every single topic that how my personal development community works is every month there's a different theme that we dive into because I love just learning about different topic areas, whether it's fear and imposter syndrome, scarcity mindset, generating joy and happiness, change, all of that. So every month it's a different theme and I teach off of that.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Have you looked into NLP at all?
I have. So here's the thing. I'm really big on being familiar with all different buckets, but then I don't like to pick one framework, right? This is kind of even how I feel like I won't go there into too much detail, but like religion even. I love to be familiar and then kind of a la carte pick from different things versus saying I'm a this and putting myself into a certain framework. So I am familiar with it, yes.
Yes, I'm certified in NLP, but I
Awesome.
have like my own thing. So I was like, you sound like a mindset coach when you're talking about this because that is a rule of the subconscious mind is that your energy is not just based on physical input, but emotional input. So if you're not excited about the day, you'll have like no energy. But like on your wedding day, it doesn't matter how early you got up. You were like, woo.
I know. It's so true. And it's like it's so simple, but it's like, I wish that everyone can actually practice that. And we'll get there. We're all getting there.
What do you tell people who are consistently tired every day and it's mostly because they're just not excited about their life?
I'm asking them to take inventory of when they're doing something for the first time. I'm asking them to look at if their priorities are mapped out before their to-dos. If the things that they say are important to them, they're giving lip service to versus actually scheduling. I'm asking them if they're comfortable enough to ask for help or if they're letting the other people's expectations and schedules dictate them and having no boundaries. Because often it's a boundaries and not feeling like you're living a life that's congruent with what you actually want to do or honoring your actual priorities that makes people feel so tired because they're running on fumes based off of other people's expectations of them and they don't even feel fulfilled. So it's like you can have the best workout and you can eat really well and those are huge components of if you're going to feel energized, obviously. But if you are constantly living by everybody else's expectations and you're saying yes to everything and you're not doing anything for yourself, you should expect that you're going to feel stuck and you're going to feel low energy because you're not doing what actually lights you up. So there's very tactical ways that I feel like you can kind of take inventory of that first. And the easiest way is literally open up your calendar. Is it everybody else's to-dos or do you have your priorities mapped out? Because that's the first place to start. And all of a sudden it starts to then like layer on top of that where you're starting to craft this life that you're obsessed with.
I love that. Such easy stuff that we just don't tend to think about.
Yeah. That's why I love it though, because it's so simple. Like it's not this crazy elaborative like plan and like thing you have to do. It's like tiny little steps that you can start to layer like a cake and you just get happier in the process.
So if you were to look back and give yourself advice over the last few years, what are like the biggest things you would tell the former you?
That being you, just full out, not watering yourself down in any situation, is going to be what's going to make you the happiest and bring the most success. Like, don't try and be what you think you should be ever. Get really dang good at being yourself. I started that process fully at 24. I like remember intentionally just deciding I'm going to really start to work on being the most me that I can be and crank the volume up and get more and more comfortable. Where I'm at the point now at 30 where I don't even want to be in situations where I feel like I have to put on a show. I'm not going. Right. So like, I'm either showing up as myself, and if that doesn't work, then I don't want to be on your stage, or I don't want to be in this. Like, I won't do it. I won't sacrifice that for anything. That. And number two is that I always have thought that the process mattered more than the end goal. But in a world, in an ecosystem within, like, for example, network marketing, where there's a lot of shiny accolades that you're going for, and you think that that's the most important thing, I had to really trust my own intuition and constantly get obsessed with the process rather than what the process could produce. And I would have told my earlier self, that is that is the North Star. Don't let yourself get focused and off track based off of accolades or achievement systems that you don't actually really care about. Stay true to the fact that making today matter is actually why you're going to see those successes versus thinking about that end goal. And the final thing is, I would encourage her not to label the space between where she is now and where she wants to go as something that doesn't serve her. Often when you are really ambitious, which I'm sure a ton of women that listen to this podcast have big goals and dreams and things that they're doing, that it's like, it's easy to look at that space and say, how am I going to get there? And start asking yourself really crappy questions and get in turn really crappy answers. Or starting to look for all of the reasons why you don't think that you're qualified, or it's overwhelming, or it's stressful, or so-and-so can do it so much better. Instead, label that space as opportunity to make yourself proud and as excitement, and savor every single stage along the way, because it's necessary for you to be able to handle that big dream later. And I think there was a season of my life where I wanted to like Amazon Prime to get to that next stage because I felt like I could handle it. But in reality, all of the missteps and the setbacks and the stumbles along the way qualified me to that next level, so that when I got there, I didn't spontaneously combust because I couldn't have handled it even though I wanted it. And when I've looked at everything in my life, like, I'm actually never going to get to the end goal because the end goal is going to change. So I'm obsessed with the journey of the person that is pushing for that next thing.
How do you let go of the shiny accolade syndrome and instead be obsessed with the process?
I get obsessed with the actual day, and where my feet are physically planted. I'm consciously saying, like, in my own head, like, this is where you are right now. Why is today going to be the freaking best? Like, why is this going to be so fun? Why are you going to show up today? Like, why does today matter? And I think I've had that mindset for a long time, but I lost a good friend of mine in November, and she died to stage 3 ovarian cancer at age 30. And she had this mantra of living life on purpose. And her death was she had cancer, but she was coming back from it. And we didn't think that death, it just like jolts you, right? And you don't have to wait for something like that to happen to understand that you actually really, like, we know this fundamentally, but you really are not gifted tomorrow. So in a world where it's like, when I get here, I'll feel fulfilled, I'll be excited, I'll be happy, you might really not get that actual day, or the person that you want to share that memory with might not actually be here. So you're not just robbing yourself, but you're robbing the opportunity of other people to get to see you excited, and in turn get excited for themselves because of the testimony of what your life is showing them is possible. So it's not just about you. If you focus on just the accolades, you're robbing everybody else around you in the process too. And I think a lot of times as women, especially for anyone listening to this that is like an Enneagram 2, a helper that wants to add value and contribute to the world, sometimes we won't do things for ourselves, but we'll do it for other people. And once I decided that if I was only focused on the end goal, I was robbing other people, I couldn't. I was like, today matters, because my influence on my fiance matters, of how he gets to enjoy today too. And I love taking that ownership.
Oh, I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in the shiny object.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So what is the biggest investment you've made in yourself with this business?
Well, we're about to move to a different state. That was a really big decision. And that honestly is probably the biggest investment that I've made, is actually deciding to reroute in order to be more set up from even like a cash flow perspective for what we can build with the company. And that was really stemmed off of the business and the dreams that we have for the future of making that decision. That's the one that is most relevant right now because we literally decided this a week ago, and it's happening pretty soon here at the end of July, depending on when this is aired. And that, but I've also always been really intentional about investing in, like, if I want to go to events, being in the room, right? Like, I know that like personal development or just learning from other people that have done things along the way, and knowing that I won't necessarily follow their exact plan because I'm a completely different person. But if I can get even little nuggets from their experience, it's going to save me time, and time's the most valuable commodity, right? So that when I got to the point that I could outsource anything, like as soon as I could outsource something, I was willing to outsource it. I wasn't trying to be some superhero wearing busy like a badge of honor and trying to say I could do it all. I am big on, like, as soon as we could have someone cleaning our house, I was like, clean that house. I'm here for it. Like, I'll pay for that. So big on outsourcing, big on making strategic decisions where it's going to set up long-term success, and it feels like a short-term sacrifice for long-term gains. So I've done that just so many times in my business. It's like kind of just part of how I think now.
So if you had like $100,000 to invest right now, where would you invest it? I'm totally curious.
I have some things that we want to do, like in the event space, and certain products that we want to launch that require liquid cash. So I would keep it in the business account and launch those things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't invest in a specific like person or advisor, but once we decided to do that, if there was someone that has done what I wanted to do and they had the expertise and they could teach me in a shorter time frame, I would give them a huge chunk of that.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Is this the first time you guys are moving based on what you want to do rather than like a job?
No, we lived in Seattle first. And then when my now fiance was applying to dental school, I really wanted to live in New York because it was a 4-year program and I just thought it would be fun. So when he got into NYU, we moved there.
Yeah.
And that was based off of his school, but also just wanting to. And then when he graduated, we decided we could live anywhere we wanted because I worked remotely and we loved Southern California. So we moved to Southern California. And now we're making the next move that we're doing based off of, part of it is really just the future for our family, where we want to put down roots, but also a lot of it around business too, and the financial aspect of it, which is crazy. So the timing of this podcast is just like a really transitional time in my life. So I'm like, oh,
I love it though, because that's life and business.
Yeah.
So tell us about what's on the horizon for your business. What's on the horizon for your company? Where are you going?
Yeah. So I am obsessed with connecting women that love personal growth together. So we have got a community, an online community where I bring in different guest speakers. That is also going to stem into events. As soon as all of this COVID stuff passes, that was like on the horizon really quickly. But obviously we have to wait until it's safe and good to go. But I love the event space. I love just like physically being around people. I'm such an extrovert and a hugger and a close talker, and I can't wait to get people in rooms together. There are things like that we've talked about, like a philanthropic branch that we'd love to develop. I could see some physical products like a clothing line potentially coming down the road. So we've got some products, and anything that I do from a course perspective always has a community element because I love cultivating community in small groups. So things like our podcasting course were stemmed from the community wanting us to create a course. So we take 20 women through it every month and do it in a small group way. So lots of ideas. Like, Joy, I could literally sit here for like 20 minutes and rattle off 800 million ideas. So like lots is coming. And in the meantime, we're going to move our little family and put some roots down. Maybe get married. We've been engaged for a year. We might get married soon. I don't know. We'll see. We'll get around to that.
Yeah, let's do that too.
Yeah, we'll do that.
So fun. Well, tell everybody where they can find you and hang out with you.
Yeah. So my favorite social media platform is Instagram. It's Kacia, Kacia.Fitzgerald. If you like this episode, I'll totally DM you back and be like, what's up? I love talking to people. And my podcast is called Empower Her Podcast. If you're into personal development, come check that out. Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much for coming on this show and
of course,
all the questions and sharing all of your goods.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Yes. And everybody, if you love this episode, don't forget, take a screenshot, share it in your stories, tag both of us because we would love to hear what your big takeaway was and how you're going to be leveling up today. All right, everybody, have a beautiful day.